What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of SMG Fishing. So we're going to be doing a project today that I've been putting off for a really long time. So as you can see, this trailer project is getting some much needed attention. This thing's probably gone the last 35 years without hardly any maintenance, as far as I can tell. Now, if they did, they probably didn't do a very good job, and it hasn't lasted quite as long as I would like it to. But in terms of overall functionality, the trailer works pretty good. I've already replaced this fold-away trailer tongue on the front of the trailer, so you guys can go check out that video if you want. And the bearings are still in overall good condition. I repacked those just to make sure, but they are actually going pretty good. So the first step of this process is to actually just remove everything from the frame of the trailer so I can get a good surface to work with. First, we removed the leaf springs from the actual trailer frame, and then we broke everything down individually. So we replaced the U-bolts, we replaced the leaf springs, we repacked the hubs. We also removed the bunks of the trailer so we can go ahead and replace those later on in this project. So once you have everything removed from the actual trailer frame itself, you want to go ahead and start removing all that rust and paint and everything that's built up over the last 35 years. What I used was a 4.5-inch Milwaukee grinder with a bunch of different variations of wire wheels. Some of the wheels I used were coarse and some of them are a little finer. They make all kinds of ones, and I'll have some of those linked down below in the description if you guys want to check those out. But like I said, this is the hardest and longest process to the entire trailer build just because it's so time consuming. It probably took me a total of 2 weeks to get the entire thing cleaned up and ready for paint. But basically, you just take the grinder and go ahead and chip away at the rust. You'll see it cleans up pretty good, and you want to make sure that you get down to bare metal. So now that we've got all that paint and rust and everything removed from the trailer, our entire trailer is down to bare metal. So the first thing we want to do to that bare metal is not paint it, but we want to clean it first. Because it's been sitting in my garage and all that dust has been floating around it, it has a real thin layer of dirt and paint and everything still on it. So what you want to do is you want to grab a rag and you want to grab, I use rubbing alcohol, and there's a lot of different compounds that you can use, but I find that rubbing alcohol is cheap and is super effective. Grab that rubbing alcohol, throw it on a rag, and wipe down the entire trailer. You're going to find that it's really dirty, and you might need to go through a couple different rags to get the entire thing clean. Once you get the entire thing wiped down once, I would definitely go back with another clean rag and try to do it again, just to make sure you get everything off of it. So now there's actually a couple different ways you can go about painting the actual trailer itself. My method was to actually just use spray paint. Spray paint's cheap, it's effective, and you don't need any tools to actually spray it on. Now I started with a self-etching primer. And this one's made by Rust-Oleum. I'll definitely have these linked down below in the description so you can go check these out. And that self-etching spray paint is actually really good for painting aluminum. I have another video if you want to go check that out. So when you're putting on the primer, you want to make sure that you put it on really lightly and you want to do a few different coats. So with this first layer of primer, you can actually make some mistakes and it not be too terrible. You can always go back and sand out the runs and the bubbles later on when it dries, and then just go ahead and put another layer of primer over top of it. Now after about 3 or 4 different coats of the primer, I would let it sit for a few hours to actually get a really good dry, and then you can go ahead and apply whatever color of paint you would like to use after that. I'm actually a really big fan of this Rust-Oleum Stops Rust paint, and I used a flat black color, but feel free to use whatever brand or whatever color you want. Just make sure that it's working for the application that you're using it for. So after about 3 or 4 coats of actual color paint, you can actually do 2 things after that. You can go back and hit it with a clear coat that will give it a little shinier finish, or you can do like I did and just leave it alone at that. I don't really like a glossy finish, especially because this is a John boat. It's meant to get dirty, so I'm not too worried about the finish overall on the trailer. And now after the paint dries, you're pretty much on your home stretch now. Everything's just bolt together now. I replaced my leaf springs because they were really rusted out and I think they were flattening out pretty bad. And they're fairly cheap too. I got mine for about $60 for the set, and I'll leave that below in the description as well. Now of course I replaced all my U-bolts, and I also replaced all my 1/2-inch bolts that held all my suspension components together. They did look okay, but they were kind of pitted and some of them were like tweaked, like they were tightened down too much. So I went ahead and replaced them anyway. I went down to Tractor Supply and got 25 of them for like 10 bucks. One other thing I would recommend is while you have everything apart is to go ahead and remove your bearing buddies if you have them, or just the caps on your hubs, and make sure that you have plenty of fresh grease in those hubs. Now when I took mine apart, the hub was full of grease, but it was also really black. And that's how you can tell that that grease is actually doing its job, and it's built up heat over time and it's gathered moisture and stuff like that. So that's why it's a darker color. Now you can go to your local auto parts and pick up grease, and I'll leave that down below in the description too if you guys want to go check that out. So like I said, I took apart my bearing buddies and I repacked them. I made sure that I got all the old grease out of the bearing by putting a dab of grease in my hand and just pushing the bearing down on top of that grease, and you can see all the old grease come off of it. Once you have that, you want to make sure you put your bearing buddies back on, or whatever your caps are, and make sure that there's plenty of grease in there. Do not overfill your bearings with grease. You will push out the seal on your bearing buddies, and then the next time you go to drop it in the water, that bearing's just going to fill up with water. That's not what you want. For me, the next step to this project was to actually replace the bunks that I had on my trailer. Now, like I said, this thing is 35 years old, and I'm sure somebody's replaced them in between here and there, but they still look really bad and dry rotted, and I just want to go ahead and replace them. So the bunks on my trailer are 10 foot long, and they are 2x4s. So just go down the hardware store and pick you up some 2x4s and make sure they're pressure treated. A lot of times people say not to use pressure treated wood when you're working with John boats, and that's only when you have the actual pressure treat on top of the aluminum itself. In my case, this is going to be on the bottom of the boat, and there's going to be a carpet and glue layer between those two. So it's not going to affect the John boat like it would if you had actually put the bare metal on the pressure treated plywood. So carpeting the bunks is actually really similar to when I carpeted the front deck on my boat, and I'll leave that link up here so you can go check out that video if you want. But basically you just cut the carpet to size. You want it to fold all the way around. You lay down your carpet glue or contact cement, whatever you prefer to use, and you just roll it on there. I always push it out with a 2x4 so it doesn't have any air bubbles in the carpet. And then also I pull it tight and staple it on the backside so that everything is snug and it's not going to come loose and wear down. So from here on out, it's pretty much a home stretch. You go ahead and throw your bunks on, put your tires on, and make sure your lights are still working because you've been messing with everything and grinding away at your trailer, and you are good to go fishing. So guys, thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure you go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We just hit 1,000 subscribers not too long ago, and I'm really excited about that. I hope you guys are really enjoying these videos. If you guys have any comments as to what I should do next or any other videos that you may want to see, make sure you go ahead and leave those down in the comments section. I really appreciate you guys watching. I will see you next time. I'm over it. I'm over it. I'm just over it.